I was raised in a family of boys. I had two brothers, and our neighborhood kids, for some reason, there was just a pile of boys that lived in our neighborhood. In our backyard, we had 3 oak trees, and they were in the shape of, if you did it just right, it was in the shape of first, second, third base. Second and third base were a little spread out. But if you put another marker, which in our case was a propane tank, you could also make it a football field. And so the neighborhood kids were always at our house. And so as a result, you know, a house full of boys, neighborhood full of boys, you grow up fighting all the time. All the time. You're always fighting. There's always a competitive element. You got to get up first or else you may not get breakfast. And so I remember when we started playing sports, there were these rules, and it was like this agreed upon set of values that everybody understood and that everybody knew. And your coaches, you know, they're trying to impart like, hey, listen, there's some lessons and there's some rules that we all have to agree to. And it was like all the other kids have been conditioned. And then like everybody in my little neighborhood, we didn't get it. But the conditioning was there are things that everybody has to agree on that matter more than the game. And I never understood it. I didn't get it at all. I thought it was a waste of time. It sounded like a good way to lose. They would say things like, you know, it's important that you have respect for the opponent. I was like, that is not true. I don't even like all the kids that live near us, and we beat them all the time. I have no respect, and we are competitive. We win. And so when they say, like, I have respect for your opponent, I was like, that's not true. And you look around, and everybody's like, yeah, what are you talking about? Things like, hey, there are things more important. Your attitude, ready for this one? Your attitude is more important than winning. I remember being like 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and I'm just racking my little immature, underdeveloped prefrontal cortex going, how can someone say that and mean it? How can your attitude be more important than winning? We're not out here having an attitude contest. We're playing a sport. And I get like, don't cheaters never win? And I'm like, that is a for sure lie. I know for a fact that one's not true. And so what they're trying to indicate, here's where I'm going with this. What they're trying to indicate is on a long enough scale, these are the elements that allow you to stay competitive in life. They allow you to stay competitive throughout the season. They allow you to stay competitive. Like the injustice of the moment does not weigh out the course of the season. It does not outweigh the course of the season. And I remember as an adult, as I started to learn and started to understand what they were saying, realizing that I was wrong. I get it now. Like I had this revelation moment, and it was, you know, I've heard it said that the most powerful moment in people's lives are when they change their mind about something, because it says a lot about our ability to consider and to rethink. And so when I get ready to preach, there are times I feel like that coach every now and then who's like, okay, remember, there's things more important than winning, realizing full well that there's going to be people who hear something from the word and they go, that just doesn't make sense. I just can't balance that. I want to try to think of it as we're getting ready to go into the sermon. Try to think of it like this. It's as though the Bible is the designer. The Word was with God. The Word was God. And it talks about this designer element of who God is, giving us his indications, not American instructions, not 2021 instructions, but a designer that goes throughout all of humanity, forwards and backwards, future and history, giving us our best practices. This is the best indication. And these are the rules that you should follow if you want to best achieve what I've got for you. Inevitably, you'll see some of those and go, I don't know if I get that one. But here's my bet. My bet is that it's not the rules that bug us. It's the attitudes that we're expected to have. Have you ever have parents that would do that? You're going to do it and you're going to like it. I'm like, I know how to do the first one. I can do the first one. I can't make me like it. There are things I'll never like. Why would I like that? That doesn't even make sense. And it feels like sometimes the Bible says, and then do this and then have this attitude. And you're like, I feel like you're messing with me. The Bible's impossible. 2 Samuel 23, verse 13 says this. This is about King David, who, you know, family of boys. Talk about a family of boys. Talk about a competitive environment. This is a guy who was raised, you know, fighting for breakfast kind of a person. It says, during harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief warriors came down to David at the cave of Adullam, while a band of Philistines was encamped in the Valley of Rephaim. I don't know if that's how you say it or not. At the time, David was in the stronghold, that means a hidden place, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. So, you know, the Philistine people, they're at Bethlehem, and that's kind of their spot, and they've been run out, and they're hiding. And David is leading this group. It's been described in 1 Samuel 23, if you want to go look it up. These just overwhelmingly strong, powerful warrior-type people, and they respected David. So David was like the head alpha in a group of alphas. He's the man. David longed for water, and he said, oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem. He's just kind of saying it to himself. Like, he's just like, oh, man, do you guys remember that place? Oh, yeah. It's kind of like how I talk about Tex-Mex. When I go to Texas, oh, man, remember Uncle Julio's? Oh, man, what I wouldn't do. He's just kind of having this moment, he's in the middle of battle. It says, so the three mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. So just catch you up. They went into enemy territory. They fought through the enemy territory. They got water out of this well, and they brought it back to King David, which is just an overwhelmingly kind gesture. A dangerous one, but if you know these guys, if you've ever known people like this, and I don't think we have warriors like this in common time, but if you know people that are sort of that like alpha type personality, there's probably a joy that they got, and like, we'll do that. We can do that. They come back, and they've got the water from Bethlehem, and David, he's looking at it, he's like, what's that? And they're like, you're not going to believe this. Do you remember? And he's like, I mean, just that loving moment of like, we did it for you. And David's going, What? Like, they didn't tell him they were going to do it. They just went and did it. They just went and did it, and they come back. It says they carried it back to David, but he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out. What? He poured it out before the Lord. So they go through enemy lines. They go fighting through the battle. They go to the enemy territory, get water out of the well. They bring it back to David, give it to David, and David pours it out on the ground and won't drink it. He says this, far be it from me, Lord, to do this. He said, is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives? And David would not drink it. Unspoken rules, the hidden little nuances of life, the things that at a glance make no sense, but that just unlock the richness of what it means to live for God. And these are the kind of moments that at a glance you kind of question, but if we can change our thinking, if we can reshape our thinking about these kinds of moments, there is a richness to life that I would love to think sort of defines the culture of what it means to be a part of Shiloh. So in high school, I watched a nerdy movie. It's called The Matrix. And I know, sorry. But I watched it in high school when it first came out. I was like 99 or something like that. And I haven't watched it since. I should have probably gone and brushed up on it before I used it as a reference. But there's one part of this movie that stands out to me is there's a character named Morpheus, and he's sitting there, he's got his glasses on, he's this big scary, he's the guide, so to speak, to our hero. And our hero, John Wick, is sitting there, and he's like trying to decide how this is going to go. And Morpheus says this, I wrote it down. He says, this is your last chance. He's telling him, this is your last chance. After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. In the book, The Republic, it's Plato's writing, and Plato talks about the cave. And if you want to Google it, you can just look up Plato's cave, Plato, Plato's cave. And it describes consciousness. What does it mean to live in consciousness? What is reality? Do we know what reality is? And it's kind of this trippy, dark thing. But Plato's cave is actually where, like, Alice in Wonderland gets its start. It's the place where the Matrix gets its start. It all goes back to Plato's cave. And Plato's cave is described this way. It's prisoners that have been in this cave forever, their whole life, and there's a fire that goes on behind them. And they've never been outside the cave. They've never known anything but this cave. And they're standing there looking at the wall. And as people will pass by, these shadows are up on the wall. Now, this is their only version of reality that they've ever known. This is all they've ever known. They've been prisoners their whole life. And they're watching, and these shadows come by, and they start to develop these theories and these thoughts about what those shadows are and what they mean and all this, how people are armchair quarterback. This is what that must mean, and this is what that is, and this is this. And their entire concept of reality is based on what they're seeing. That's kind of the Matrix idea. So Plato talks about how if one of the prisoners were to happen to escape and venture outside the cave, his eyes adjust, and all of a sudden he sees light. And as he begins to, process light, that he starts to see things, and he goes, oh, this is what reality actually is. This is what reflections are. This is what shadows are. And he thinks of the shadows as being real until he realizes everything else that's at play, right? So as he goes back into the cave to tell his friends, his eyes haven't adjusted, and his eyes are accustomed to the light. And he goes back in there, and his friends are doubtful now that something's happened and it's changed him, and they become dogmatic about the shadows. They go, no, something's happened to you. You've been corrupted. It's kind of a trippy sort of a thing, but here's what stood out to me about the Morpheus line. He didn't say, if you take the blue pill, you will automatically believe this. He says, if you take this pill, you get to believe whatever you want to believe. Truth doesn't even matter. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but if you take the red pill, you get to see the truth. And I think sometimes that's where I feel that when I say that we're trying to understand the nuances from the designer, maybe that's what I'm saying is, I think as a country, I don't live anywhere else. I don't know any other cultures. I've never lived in another time period, so I can't speak to all of humanity. I'm not suggesting that. This is not a existential all of humanity sort of a moment, but I am saying this, that it feels like our country, if we're not careful, that our culture and that our society and that especially our politics and the way that we interact and our social interactions and our social media, we have started to think that that's not cultural. We've started to think that that's reality. It's almost as though there's so much of the blue pill that we've already taken that we didn't even know there was a choice. We've never stopped to consider that there's another way to live life. We are going through life thinking this isn't the way that we do it. It's thinking like this is just the way. It's as though we don't know that, that there's another way to be, that there's another way to live, that there's another way to engage or interface with life. Let's think of it this way. I've said it, and I've said it, and I've said it, and I know I'm probably getting on everybody's nerves with this, but when you think of the red pill, blue pill, let's think red pill is like the love of wisdom. The like, hey, if there's truth outside the cave, I want to discover it. Hey, if there's truth in the matrix, let's figure out what it is. Whatever is true, no matter how hard, that's what I want. And the blue pill being, I just want to keep believing what I want to believe. I just want to keep doing it the way that I've always done it. I don't want to consider that there's another way to live life. I don't even want to consider that there's any other way to live than the way I'm living. As a culture, if we've already taken the blue pill, here's our challenge. We now have to exchange it. We now have to address that, like, this is what the word says, this is what culture says, this is what society says, this is what the word says, and this are not matching up anymore. Maybe I took the blue pill somewhere along the way and I didn't realize it. I think it's throughout history, you've seen like that the blue pill, the love of wisdom is the red pill. Blue pill in this case is the love of conquering. This deeply held, beloved love of conquering. And we don't even say it that way anymore. So when I say you love conquering, you go, no, I don't. I don't love conquering. We think of conquering. We think of like Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great. I wrote a few down. Napoleon Bonaparte, Attila the Hun. Attila the Hun one time offered to marry the Western emperor's sister. I wrote this down because this sounds like the rodeo culture. This sounds like something the rodeo culture would do. Attila offered to marry the Western emperor's sister, but he made it clear that the dowry would be half of the brother's lands. The offer was refused, and the whole breadth of Europe at once was invaded. It's not like it's not enough to win. It's like we got to make an example. We have to win big. And you go, well, I just don't think of myself as being that way. Let me give you a few. Let me give you a few, because here's the problem. There's a ditch on both sides of the conquering road. There truly is. And when I start to express this, and you start to have this moment of like, maybe I did take the blue pill. Maybe I have focused more on conquering versus loving truth and wisdom. Let me give you an example. Has there ever been a movie about someone that did nothing, accomplished nothing, that you found interesting? We listened to stories about people who overcome and who conquer and who let us believe that we can do that, but that is not what I'm talking about. What about this one? If somebody were to go, ew, I'm not poor, you'd be like, oh man, that person's lost. How dare you be like, look down on the poor and think that you're better than someone because you're poor. What about this one? Ew, rich. See, as a culture, we've been prepped. If you're rich, you have to not want to be poor. If you're poor, you have to, no, I'm not like those rich people. It works both ways. Got another one. I just care about people, so I'm a Democrat. Well, I just care about people, so I'm a Republican. It's conquering. My team is better than your team. No, my team is better than your team. I'm on team rich, ew, poor. I'm on team poor, ew, rich, but it's still conquering. It's still competitive. It's still finding us versus them. It's still drawing a line between who you are and who you don't want to be. I'm going to keep going. Eventually winning becomes like the highest good. The highest good. Here's the problem with anything that becomes the highest good is it goes beyond things like morality, ethics, character, all the things that the Bible says are really important. Those get now shuffled down and we go, no, I want to be recognizable. I want to be famous. I want to be rich. I want to be, what about this one? I want to be the best at being good. If someone goes, I am so selfish, I'm going to break all the rules. As society, we're taught to go like, ew, that's not good. You're not supposed to be selfish and break all the rules. But what about somebody who were to go, well, I'm selfish and I want everything I want, so I'm going to follow the rules so well that everybody has to reward me. See, conquering, the problem that I'm realizing in my own life, and keep in mind, I was raised in a little culture of conquerors, like always competitive, always fighting, always like fighting for your place in the world, so much so that you don't even realize when you're doing it. If we're not careful, here's the problem. We're a capitalistic society, which by the way, I'm okay with. But the problem is it doesn't run unless there's competition. You can't sell things to satisfied people. You can't sell things to people unless they are unsatisfied with where they are, unless they're motivated by fear. Well, guess what a byproduct of fear is? Anger. And then you look around like everybody's angry. We look at our politics. Well, I'm like this. Well, I'm like this. And we're a two-party system. That's a great thing about a two-party system. You can keep everybody mad. Our whole culture, our whole competition is on winning in the moment, winning today, that winning is more important than character, that we have to win today, that today is more important than the long term. Things that we find about the culture and the character of a people who follow Jesus and the sacrifices and the death that come with that get so far lost in the back because we are a nation of conquerors. Not that the conquering is the problem. It's our love of conquering, that we try to conquer everything all the time, every single day. The second thing that a love of conquering will do, and this is blue pill as an example, a blue pill that we didn't even know we were taking. We've all fallen asleep. We've gone to sleep. We've just accepted that conquering is a part of our personality, is that we never appreciate anything because we're always aspiring to more. Doesn't matter how much you have, I got to have more. Why do you think people are in so much debt? Rick Warren said that we spend money we don't have on things that we don't need to impress people we don't like. It's the nature of our culture. And I'm going to get back to what happened in the story of David, but we have to understand that David poured out a win. The reason that story stands out to me is when someone starts to absorb the reputation. What about this one? You do so much. Yeah, I guess I do. I have to win in the moment. I have to be thought of a certain way. I have to manage an image. I have to be the most important person in the room. I have to be thought of as the most virtuous. I have to be thought of as the most righteous. And the problem is it starts to just create competition. It can never be your fault. It's always got to be somebody else's fault. You can never absorb a loss. You've got to win every single moment of every single day. We don't appreciate anything. We don't appreciate the advantages or disadvantages that come with our race or our gender because we're afraid if we concede, that is a little bit of an advantage, that we give up room, and we can't give up room because we have to win every single day. The problem is we're constantly trying to conquer more money, more comfort, more of the things that we think that we need, more of the dream that we have for ourselves. You're like, man, this seems like a long ramp up. Here's where we're going. John 6:6, non-ironically. Jesus is teaching these people, and he's talking about death and suffering and loss and the ability to be right and lose, or the ability to do the right thing and not get the outcome that you wanted. The ability to take a water sacrifice and go, I'm not going to absorb that. I'm going to be a part of the loss also. In the same way that you guys sacrificed, I'm going to sacrifice, and I'm going to be a part. When somebody goes, you're doing such a good job, you got to see everybody else that's around me. Instead of absorbing all these things, Jesus is talking about death and sacrifice, and it says this in verse 60, on hearing it, many of his disciples said, this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Red pill, blue pill. Because Jesus is saying, wait a minute. This is not a religion of winning. This is not a white Western how to get rich religion. It may cost you things. It may cost you your reputation. It may cost you your standing in the community. People may not think more of you. People may actually think less of you. You may face death and suffering and consequences, and they go, well, wait a minute. If that's true, if that's really what's outside the cave, maybe I'd rather stay in here and look at the shadows. Jesus is not saying that it's about losing. He's saying it includes losing. It includes suffering. It includes just the bitter. Is anybody else like this? Just that bitter flavor of being right and losing. I did everything right. And Jesus is preparing them hey, part of the love of wisdom, if you're going to take this red pill of loving wisdom at all costs, loving it, loving what it produces in your life, you have to know this is part of the expense. Red pill, blue pill. And there's a lot of these disciples following Jesus. He starts talking about losing and suffering, and they're like, I don't know. That's my question, though. What if you find out the truth, and the truth is harder than what you had imagined? Then what? What do you do? That's your Morpheus moment. Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, does this offend you? See, red pill means it's going to be difficult. Blue pill says what? You could go back to believing what you want to believe. Not what do you naturally, but what do you want to believe? If you want to just go back to what you want to believe, that this is a Christianity, a faith of like following Jesus and everything just goes great and I'm the most recognized person and every time I do something, everyone sees it. Because does this offend you? That this might very well be a lifelong endeavor of losing. Does this offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man ascended to where he was before? The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. So what he's saying is, when you travel outside the cave, you realize that the shadows that you've seen your entire life, as good as they may look, are not based in truth. Maybe it's harder outside the cave, but at least it's real. At least as you're following Jesus and things don't go well, you know that you're living in this suffering that is included in this pursuit of Jesus. Because let me tell you that Jesus is not interested in you winning every single day, every single conflict, and every single argument. It's like sometimes, anybody ever feel this way? It's like almost sometimes Jesus is just dragging me through losses. And I'm like, I'm trying to do it right. And he's like, I know, it comes at a loss. It's an important distinction that if you were to say, because he said, there are some of you who do not believe. That's an important distinction because what Jesus is saying is, it's kind of like every yes is a no, same concept. Some of you who do not believe. This is an important distinction. What he's saying is, if you don't believe this, what you're saying is, instead, I believe what? What am I replacing that with? And I think there are times whenever Jesus leads us into something, I can't do this. And he goes, okay, then what do you believe? See, that's the difficulty. You think, I just don't believe anything. Everybody believes something. It's like trying to turn off the direction of light. For Jesus did know from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him. And he went on to say, you know what's crazy to me? He fed them anyway. There's 5,000 people earlier in this chapter, and Jesus fed them knowing they didn't believe him. They were just there for the daily win. They were just there so they could win in the moment. They were hungry, and Jesus was feeding them, and they were going, I have to win today, have to win today, have to win today. Oh, we're following the God who can give you food. Great, I love that God. Oh, we're following the God who can walk on water. Great, I love that God. Oh, I'm following the God who can give me a job and find me a spouse and turn my life better. Oh, yeah, I love that God. But deep down, we're going, but as long as he's that God. As long as he's the blue pill God that allows me to keep winning and feeling good. And every time I do something good, I want a reward for it. Every time I stay a little extra longer, I want to make sure someone notices. I want people to know when I'm suffering. He went on to say this. This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them. From this time, many of his disciples, this is verse 66. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. They said, we'd rather just look at the shadows on the cave. We want to go back to what's comfortable. We want to go back to what's known. We don't want to give up our reputation or our standing. Our friends are making fun of us for following you. Do you ever feel that way? Jesus, I was following you, and people made fun of me, so you better turn back and no longer followed him. And he says to his disciples, this is verse 67. He says, you do not want to leave too, do you? It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I've preached on it a lot. Jesus looks at his disciples and goes, do you guys want to leave too? And they didn't say no. We don't want to leave. They said, in essence, it was Simon Peter answered. He doesn't say, no, we don't want to leave. He kind of says, yeah, we would love to leave. We would love to go back in a cave, but we've taken the wrong pill. We believe you. We can't unbelieve what we've seen. Like we took the red pill. We want to know what's true. This is the love of wisdom versus the love of winning. This is what he said, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. It's a very specific trigger moment when Jesus says this, nobody can win unless I win for them. Seems simple. That seems simple enough. Nobody can win unless I win for them. And they go, well, then anybody could do it. That could be a story about anybody. There's nothing special about that. I don't get any recognition for the things I did right. You're not letting me win. You're saying that deep down at the end of the day, you're taking credit for all of my wins. I don't get any amount of recognition. Sometimes it's not about having it. It's about having more than the next guy. And Jesus is going, it's equal footing. It's an equal opportunity that Jesus is giving to his people. And then when he says, nobody can win unless I do it for him, at that point, out. See, the blue pill celebrates things like growth. We love growth, personal growth. I'm just working on my personal growth. Doesn't sound bad. Wealth, status, fame, winning, comfort, superiority. It's a scarcity mindset. Me over you. As long as I'm ahead of you, then when the line gets cut off, I'll be in, you'll be out, if that's what it takes. It's a scarcity mindset. The blue pill thinking is, I have to be competitive because that's how I get the things that I want. I have to manage my image. I have to manage my income. I have to manage my surroundings, my relationships. I have to be in control, and I'm constantly competing. Second Samuel 23 says, far be it from me, Lord, to do this. He said, is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives, and David would not drink it? I would have loved to have been at that moment when they're so proud of themselves and they bring it to David and David pours it out, and you have to think that they're like, what are you doing? We got you water from the place. And he goes, I'm not above you. I'm not trying to conquer the people that God has put in my life. I'm not trying to win against people that are brought into my life. I'm trying to love the people that God has brought into my life. I'm trying to understand, like, I'm in this line the same as you guys are. I'm pouring out as a sacrifice. That's why, listen, if you volunteer at this church, or if you work at this church, or if you're around Shiloh, let me tell you this. Listen to this, what I'm about to say. When people come to you and they go, you do so much around here, that's okay that they say that. There's nothing wrong with being involved and working hard and staying late and getting there early. There's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of like the hope. That's great. But when they give you a bucket of water, part of what it means to be a part of Shiloh is that we pour it out and we go, no. I'm just part of the team. I've been propped up by the people around me. Don't put too much focus on me. That's the best indicator of how long somebody's going to last at Shiloh, is how often they drink the water versus pour it out. It's a cultural thing. And if you explain that to a kid, you go, character is more important than winning. The knee jerk is what, why, how? But you see stories like this where David remained surrounded by the strongest people in his country. You look at Saul. Saul was a blue pill kind of a leader. He was always trying to rob from David and steal from David and take David's credit. And all the strongest people in the community, just practically thinking, all the strongest people in the community sided with who? Red pill. The love of wisdom, the pursuit of Jesus, the pursuit. And David was a winner, but what you see is that David kept winning in perspective. He loved what he did, but winning was not his highest priority. David's son, Solomon, writes this in Proverbs chapter 4. We've already read it, I know, once, and I don't care. We're going to read it again because this is the defining portion of red pill, blue pill. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. This is someone who has fallen in love with what's going on outside the cave, even when it's hard, even when it's difficult, even when you go to your job and your boss does something unfair, even in your relationship when you choose to love your spouse over having to win the argument, even when your kids are being little knuckleheads and you decide to love them instead of showing them how much better you are, even when somebody has a differing political view, even when you save up money and then an unexpected expense goes and you're not winning in the way that you thought you were going to win. What it's saying is, at all costs, pursue the love of wisdom, even when it's harder outside the cave than it was inside the cave. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, though it cost you all you have, get understanding. Though it cost you your cultural norm, though it cost you your political norms, though it cost you all of your social interactions, the way that you had it, like, I got to win, no, actually, you know my least favorite two words maybe in the English dictionary right now? Well, actually. What you're saying is actually what I think is right and what you think is wrong. Competitive, conquering, blue pill type behavior. It's saying give all of that up, fully accept the loss, fully be willing to accept a loss. When David says this, far be it from me, Lord, to do this, he said, is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives, and David would not drink it? Remember I said that sometimes there are rules in the Bible, but then there's attitudes, and you go, you can't make me like it. Here's how, here's the trick, here's the magic trick, here's where the key that unlocks the door. You ready for it? David didn't say, ew, yucky, I don't like that water. He doesn't say, ew, I don't even like that well. He'd already indicated that he did. It's okay to be honest with yourself and go, I like winning. I like conquering. I like feeling superior. I like feeling like I've got a higher information. I like the things that happen when I take the blue pill. I enjoy that. That's just humanity. You don't have to lie and be like, ew, yucky, I hate being right. But what David is saying is he pours this out and accepts a loss when a win was offered to him. He was given a win and he pours it out and he takes a loss. What he's saying is, as much as I want this water, there is something that I want more. There's a richness to life that I want more. There is something to this existence that I want that is more than my society has to offer. And if it costs me a win, it's worth it. The price tag is not too expensive. That's what Proverbs is saying, is even if the red pill costs you everything, it's worth it. Spend the money. That's what outside Plato's cave moment is that the rules and the attitudes by the designer, you go, wait a minute, I think the designer knows more about what I'm doing than I do. There's life beyond the blue pill. See, the blue pill says, I could be good enough. There is a blue pill element to religion. Actually, the American church, if we're not careful, has had a history of this. Be good enough. Here's the rules. You follow those, you'll be good enough. We can't fix your attitude, but we can fix your behavior. You can be good enough. Conquer sin. Conquer your badness. Conquer your flesh. You just got to try a little bit harder. You've got to win. And that's what John chapter 6 was about. Jesus said, no, I get the win. I'll live the life that you couldn't live. I'll get the win that you couldn't achieve, and we'll trade it. The win is already yours. That's the beauty of this, is that the win is already yours, so you don't have to keep getting it every single day. You can just love what you're doing. We're going into a series about this. You can just love what you're doing. You can enjoy it without having to show it off. You can do something wonderful without having to be seen. You can love and be grateful and enjoy the wins and the losses and go there. Well, what if I never own a private jet? That's a loss, buddy. What if I never have what my neighbor has? Well, that's a loss. But that's the expense of pursuing wisdom, is the willingness to accept that there are losses that lead to bigger wins. I'm going to wrap it up with this. We're done. I feel like I've gone a little long. What does it look like in a life of someone who says, give me Jesus. Give me wisdom. You can have my wins. Take my trophy room, but let me out of the cave. Let me go see where conquering has shaped my life in a way that's been detrimental. Take me outside the cave. Show me what's real, even if it's hard. What does a life like that look like? Galatians 5:22 through 23 says this. The fruit of the Spirit, the result of a life of pursuing wisdom and the love of Jesus, is love, joy, peace, forbearance. What is forbearance? It's taking a loss. Forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There's 9 of them. It says that's what your life begins to produce, because here's what I've noticed. Even the people that are the most successful in all of their conquering don't accomplish those 9 elements. It's like they win their way into a giant loss. And Jesus is indicating that we can lose our way into a giant win. Red pill, blue pill. Do I want control of my life and control of my religion and control of my righteousness? Or am I willing to accept losses and go, Jesus, just show me what outside the cave looks like. Show me how my life has been shaped by my culture and reshape it to who you've called me to be. Teach me how to understand that so that I don't just change my behavior. I change my attitude because I say there's something I want even more. Let's pray. Lord, it's impossible to have the right attitude if we don't believe it. If there's something that we genuinely want more than righteousness, we're never going to have the right attitude about the losses. But God, when we value your righteousness and your wisdom above all else, there's no price tag that's too expensive. Everything can be accredited to getting closer to who you are, life outside the cave. God, give us a curiosity about who we would be if we just were fully invested into who you called us to be. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.